It began on a quiet morning in early spring, the kind of morning where the air feels almost too still, too heavy, like the world is waiting for something to happen. In a suburban neighborhood just outside St. Cloud, Minnesota, a two-story colonial house sat framed by dogwood trees just starting to bloom. From the outside, the Parker home looked perfect, a symbol of middle-class peace. But inside, behind the manicured hedges and polished windows, something was festering. That morning, the house was unusually silent. No music, no footsteps, just the ticking of the wall clock in the hallway, marking the seconds before everything would change. When officers arrived at 8:17 a.m., responding to a welfare check requested by a coworker, the silence was suffocating. They knocked. No answer. The front door was locked, the mailbox overflowing. A neighbor, Mrs. Larkin, told police she hadn't seen anyone since Friday night. When the door was finally breached, they found a scene that would haunt investigators for years. The faint hum of the refrigerator, a half-finished breakfast on the table, and upstairs, the truth waiting to be exposed. Before we go deeper, listen closely, because in this story, the line between truth and manipulation is razor thin. What happened in that house didn't start with violence. It began with love, or something that once looked like it. The Parkers were, by all appearances, an ordinary American family. Robert Parker, 46, was a financial advisor at a mid-sized firm downtown. His wife, Elaine, 44, taught elementary school. They had two grown children, Hannah, 23, and Michael, 21, both in college out of state. On paper, they had everything. But as detectives would later discover, their life was a carefully curated lie. Neighbors remembered them as private, polite, always composed. They were the kind of couple you waved to but never really knew, one resident later told local news. But beneath the calm, something darker had taken root. Money troubles, quiet resentment, and an inheritance dispute no one outside the family knew about. According to later statements, Robert's father had passed away 6 months earlier, leaving behind an estate worth nearly $2 million. But the will, revised weeks before his death, left the majority of it not to Robert, but to his sister, Margaret. Robert, who had spent his life trying to impress his father, was left with a fraction. Friends recalled he became distant, withdrawn. His colleagues said he stopped showing up for work. And Elaine Vosbaum, she began making her own plans. Phone records would later show calls to a real estate agent in Wisconsin, searches for how to file for separation quietly. Private journal entries discovered in her desk revealed she felt afraid of what Robert was becoming. By the time March came, their marriage was crumbling. But no one, not even Elaine's closest friend, expected it to end like this. According to police reports, the call came in at 7:58 a.m. Saturday. It was Robert himself. His voice was calm, eerily detached. "You'll find her upstairs," he said. "I'm not running." When officers arrived minutes later, Robert was sitting on the porch steps in his robe, hands folded, eyes fixed on the distance. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. Inside, they found Elaine in the master bedroom, lifeless, lying across the bed as if she had just fallen asleep. No sign of struggle, no forced entry. But on the nightstand was a single envelope with one word scrawled across it in his handwriting: truth. That envelope would become the center of everything. In the interrogation room later that day, detectives pressed him for details. For hours, he said nothing, just sat in silence, eyes fixed on the wall clock as if measuring time in penance. And then, without warning, he whispered, "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." What followed would become one of the most haunting confession tapes in Minnesota's history. The recording begins at 2:37 p.m., the sound of the tape clicking on. The detective's measured voice. "Robert, this is your chance to tell your side." Then his, quiet, unsteady. "You want the truth? I'll give you the truth. But you won't believe it." He started with the inheritance. How his father had cut him out because of an old feud. How his sister, Margaret, had manipulated their father into changing the will. How Elaine had secretly sided with her, encouraging Robert to let it go. Words he said felt like betrayal. But then the story twisted. He claimed Elaine had been planning to leave him, taking what little was left of his inheritance with her. She had everything set, the papers, the accounts, even a storage unit. She wasn't scared of me. She was done with me. The detectives let him talk. Hours passed. His tone shifted from sorrow to bitterness, then to something detached, analytical. When you give someone your whole life and they still look at you like a stranger, he said softly. Eventually, you start to believe you were never really seen at all. It wasn't until he mentioned the envelope that detectives leaned forward. It's all there, he said, the real story. What she did, what I did was why it had to happen. Inside the envelope, they found a handwritten letter spanning 8 pages, dated 2 days before Elaine's death. The writing was meticulous, deliberate. It began like a diary and ended like a eulogy. In it, Robert described years of emotional sabotage, financial deception, and humiliation. But the last line stopped everyone cold. By the time you read this, one of us will be free. The letter raised more questions than it answered. Forensic evidence later revealed no struggle, no defensive wounds. Elaine had ingested a lethal dose of sedatives mixed with alcohol. Toxicology confirmed she hadn't taken them willingly. Yet Robert's fingerprints were everywhere. On the glass, the pill bottle, even the ink of the note. Still, something didn't add up. His demeanor, the lack of remorse, the precision, it all felt rehearsed. The lead detective, Sergeant Kyle Renner, would later say in an interview, he wasn't confessing to clear his conscience. He was performing. Every word felt like it was meant for someone else to hear. And maybe it was. 2 weeks later, while processing evidence, a technician found something hidden in a false panel behind the bedroom dresser, a small digital recorder. It contained nearly 4 hours of private conversations between Robert and Elaine, recorded without her knowledge. The last recording was dated the night before her death. Elaine's voice, "You can't control everything, Robert." Robert's voice, "I don't want to control everything. I just want the truth." Elaine, "Oh no, then stop lying to yourself." A pause, then the faint sound of a glass being set down. The recording ended there. Investigators couldn't determine what happened next, but the discovery of those tapes reframed everything. They weren't just evidence. They were a window into a mind unraveling. As the case built momentum, the media descended. "The perfect family exposed," read one headline. "The letter of truth, husband confesses to a silent killing." Another called him the calmest killer in America. But the real question wasn't how Elaine died. It was why Robert wanted the world to hear his version of the truth. Because deep down, it wasn't guilt driving his confession. It was control. He knew the cameras were on, the microphones recording, the public listening. His story would outlive him. And that, more than anything, was the legacy he wanted. To be remembered not as a murderer, but as a man misunderstood. Yet buried within the evidence, police found something even darker. A second letter, unsigned, undated, hidden inside Elaine's jewelry box. The handwriting matched hers. It read, "If anything happens to me, look at Robert. But remember, he's not the only one lying." That single line would turn the investigation upside down. The discovery of Elaine's hidden letter shifted everything. Detectives who had thought the case was closed now realized they'd only seen one layer of the truth. The handwriting, verified by a forensic analyst, matched Elaine's perfectly. But that final sentence, "he's not the only one lying," suggested a conspiracy that reached beyond Robert. Sergeant Renner ordered a full re-examination of all digital communications, emails, financial transfers, and call records. Within days, they uncovered a string of encrypted emails between Elaine and Margaret, Robert's sister. The messages were months old, written in careful, coded language. Phrases like "the transition is almost complete," and "he'll never know until it's too late." At first, it seemed like meaningless family chatter. But then came one line that made Renner stop reading. "Once the trust updates, everything will fall into place. The estate, the inheritance, the motive." When confronted, Margaret denied any involvement. She claimed Elaine had reached out only for emotional support. But bank records told another story. 2 wire transfers totaling $40,000 sent from an account in Elaine's name to one in Margaret's, just weeks before the murder. Investigators began to wonder if Elaine had indeed been planning to leave Robert, and if Margaret had helped her. Maybe the inheritance wasn't the only betrayal. Maybe Elaine had discovered something about Robert's finances that he couldn't let go public. Renner began reconstructing the final 72 hours before Elaine's death. Security footage from a nearby gas station showed Robert buying a bottle of red wine and a box of sleeping pills. That same night, Elaine was recorded withdrawing $8,000 in cash from her personal savings account. 2 people, preparing for 2 very different futures. The prosecution saw a clear pattern, obsession, control, and revenge. But the defense would later argue something else, that Elaine had manipulated Robert emotionally, setting a trap to push him over the edge. The case became a media storm. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. Podcasters dissected every frame of the confession tape. And through it all, Robert remained silent, stoic, watching. The trial began 9 months later in a packed Minnesota courtroom. By then, the public had already decided Robert was guilty. But what unfolded over the next 6 weeks blurred the line between victim and villain. The prosecution opened with the confession tape, playing those haunting words again for the jury. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. They showed the letter labeled Truth, the toxicology report. The recordings from the hidden device. Piece by piece, they built a picture of a man driven by pride and resentment. But the defense had a different strategy. They didn't deny Robert's actions. They reframed them. His attorney argued he'd been emotionally manipulated for years, gaslighted into paranoia by both his wife and sister. They played snippets of the secret recordings where Elaine mocked his fears, calling him weak and just like your father. They claimed the sedatives were part of a mutual plan, a failed double suicide born of desperation. It sounded absurd. But in a case built on perception, absurdity had power. Then came the moment that shifted the entire courtroom's mood, a witness the defense had quietly prepared. Margaret. Under oath, she denied any scheme. But her calm exterior cracked when Renner produced the bank records. Her voice trembled. She claimed the money had been a gift, that she'd planned to help Elaine start over. When pressed on the inheritance emails, she paused too long. The silence was damning. Did you plan to alter the trust to exclude your brother? The prosecutor asked. Her eyes flicked toward Robert. We just wanted what was fair. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. In that instant, every rumor, every suspicion, every dark thought Robert had about betrayal crystallized into something tangible. The defense's narrative, that Robert had been pushed, cornered, broken, suddenly didn't seem so far-fetched. For days, testimony blurred into repetition. Experts, analysts, psychologists dissecting every action, every line of the letter. The jury listened, weary-eyed, as both sides painted different versions of the same tragedy. But then, on the fourth week, the prosecution revealed something unexpected. Evidence found on Elaine's laptop that hadn't been disclosed before. A draft email titled Final Statement Never Sent. It read, if I go through with this, I hope people understand it's not revenge, it's survival. That one line redefined everything. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the courtroom held its breath. The verdict, guilty of second-degree murder. Not premeditated, not cold-blooded, but guilty nonetheless. Robert Parker was sentenced to 24 years in prison. No outburst, no reaction, just a slow nod, as if he'd been waiting to hear the words. But the story didn't end there. 2 years into his sentence, something strange happened. A journalist named Dana Whitlow, producing a documentary on wrongful convictions, filed a records request for unused evidence. Among the archived materials was a sealed envelope labeled Recorder B. Inside was another audio file, one investigators had missed. It wasn't from the night of Elaine's death. It was from 3 days before. The voices were clear. Elaine, if we do this, we can't go back. Margaret, he'll never see it coming. He's too blinded by guilt. Elaine, Emma, I don't want to hurt him. I just want out. Margaret, sometimes you have to break something to be free. The recording was brief, but its implications were explosive. If authentic, it meant Elaine and Margaret had been planning something together, possibly to frame Robert or at least provoke his downfall. The file was authenticated by a private lab. Chain of custody issues prevented it from being used to overturn the conviction, but the documentary that followed, The Truth They Buried, sparked a nationwide debate. Was Robert Parker truly a murderer, or had he been the final casualty of a family built on deception? Public opinion fractured. Some saw a manipulative man who couldn't handle losing control. Others saw a broken husband trapped between two betrayals. Robert himself never spoke publicly again. He refused interviews, letters, even parole hearings. But on the 10th anniversary of Elaine's death, the prison warden reported finding a short note left on his bunk before transfer. The truth was never the problem. Belief was. To this day, no one knows what he meant. Margaret disappeared from public view after the trial, selling her home and changing her name. The Parker estate, once valued at $2 million, was liquidated to cover legal fees. And the house, the one framed by the dogwoods, remained unsold for nearly a decade. Neighbors say the lights still flicker on some nights. The mail still piles up. And sometimes faintly you can hear the echo of a man's voice, calm, detached, repeating words no one wants to hear again. You want the truth? I'll give you the truth, but you won't believe it. Because in the end, the confession tape didn't close the case. It only exposed how fragile the line between love and control really is. Justice was served, the files were closed, and the world moved on. But those who heard the tape say one thing never left them: the tone in Robert's voice when he said her name. Not angry, not guilty, just empty. And sometimes emptiness is the heaviest truth of all. So as you sit there, listening to this story unfold, ask yourself, if the person you loved most betrayed you, how far would you go to make them understand your pain? Because every family has secrets. But it's not the lies that destroy us, it's when those lies are finally exposed. Do you think justice was truly served, or were there still secrets left buried? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you want us to keep uncovering the world's darkest family betrayals, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us. The next story we bring to light might be closer than you think.